good morning. Those of us who are here, this worked out for some of us to come on early and have some live time with Dr. Tanya Wright. We learned with you the last week in September, though you weren't literally with us, but we learned a lot from you already, Tanya. And that was a rich kickoff institute for those who are new to the network. We learned a lot from you as far as some of the 10 essentials about the 10 essentials. And really, we're translating that to the updates of the essentials where those were a necessary transfer. We had those right by us. And we're just so excited that you're here because you are one of the authors and leaders of the K-3 instructional practices for early literacy that guide our work as early literacy coaches. And you are one of our key researchers and leaders in our work as a network in Michigan. We've learned so much from you, and so much is due to your commitment to our work. And then you also were one of the really important voices and activators of the updated K-3 Essentials, which just came out late spring. So you have that perspective as well, as far as that update process and what you're excited about most with those updates. So for now, knowing the rest of today, when we come back into the main session with the whole network, and knowing that you'll be teaching us at that time, starting at 9:15 around Essential 9, Observation and Assessment to Guide Instruction, and that when I look at the questions that this group submitted at the end of September and submitted to you, they were normally around assessment and digging a little deeper into what you teach us, around the idea of a screener having a purpose, but not being enough to know what kind of glasses prescription we really need, and thinking about those classroom practices of formative assessment, diagnostic assessment. So any questions that were submitted for you specifically around that, knowing that we're going to be digging into that more deeply as a whole network this morning, we don't have to go there as much. And also a couple of questions we're asking about very specific assessments, which we don't often address right here in this space. It's kind of along those lines of, we're program agnostic a little bit in the way that we talk and we move, but there are processes that we use, and the ISDs have processes to be able to think about the tools and the assessments that schools use. So going right to our ISDs and coaching coordinators is often a good first start there when we think about specific assessments and their purposes. But just to set all that up and to say that this is an informal time, Tanya, but it's just good to hear from you. So I will stop talking so we can do that. And maybe just invite you to either start with thinking about the update process and sharing what you, what you're thinking about the updates, what excites you about the shifts in language or in priority and how the updates are discussed, or even moving to your tips and your thoughts for people who are new in a coaching or a literacy leadership position. So I'll just let you.
Sure. And folks should feel free to just ask a question in the chat if you have it. If I don't know the answer, I'll just let you know. Well, let's start with tips for people who are new. I would say my biggest tip is actually to make sure that you have worked through kind of all the literacy essentials documents, the coaching essentials and the K-3 essentials, if that's your area, or pre-K, if that's included as well. And to have gone through the modules. I think just kind of coming into this coaching network that has now been in existence since I feel like 2016. Am I right? Or is it earlier than that? Maybe 2016. I have it right. Okay. So there's a lot of accumulated knowledge that this group has created together over time. And so I think the more that you spend time in that space and digging into all of that information, the better to kind of join conversations like what's going to happen the rest of today, where some people have really been with this network since 2016, and then other people have come in over time. So definitely digging in beyond these official training times to all the materials and documents and supports and scaffolds that have been created that I'm sure that are online, but also the ones that Erin has probably given you access to. There's just a wealth of supports and information there that I think well, it's just so exciting to have. It's amazing what's been produced and the knowledge and tools that have been developed together since 2016. So that would be my biggest get started. I would say my other biggest get started, and I'm sure Susan Lallier has said this as well, is to dig deeply with teachers rather than to try to like touch a little bit of a lot of things. I think that our understanding of coaching and coaching cycles is it's that intensive work together over time on an area where a teacher is saying that they need some support, or that you figured out together the teacher needs some support. But it's that like intensity and time that tend to move classroom instruction. And sometimes I think we see like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You know what I mean? Like we worked on a read aloud this week, and next week we were working on writing, and the next week we are working on motivation. It's just a little bit here, a little bit there, jumping around. And I don't think that we have evidence that that's effective, right? That's more the equivalent of like a one-time workshop kind of thing that people get. And that's not where coaching is at its like shiniest best. The best of it, and I know Erin and Susan will say this as well, is this intensive work together with another person over time on something focused, and really documenting changes in instruction, documenting changes in kids' learning that come from that instruction, before we move on to the next thing that a teacher might need help with. So that's it. Those are my big tips. Dig into the materials and tools and get focused. Focus and time and intensity really does matter, I think, to really move instruction and kid learning. Erin, you can feel free to disagree if I said any of that.
Not at all.
To maybe what you
It's so good because for one, you're literally reminding us of the things that you in pre-recorded videos and Nell and Susan all reminded us in the kickoff so regularly. But then also at the end of those 3 days, everyone who participates gets to identify a goal for their own learning. And usually those do center around going deeper with any of the instructional practices. And most of those goals, they submit them, in the feedback form, just so that we can see them and bring them together, de-identified, and really look at those. And most of them were around what you had recommended and are confirming here around our own learning and really getting into those modules or getting into them again through the lens of our new role as a coach. And then also a lot of people, so we had 2 goals. The second was a coaching goal, and a lot of people really wanted to learn more about coaching and coaching cycles specifically, knowing that maybe at the beginning of our year, thinking about September and October, the guidance there versus how the guidance changes for what we do in November and December, where we start to get closer and more specific. But so many people wanted to learn more about coaching cycles, so they're ready when those areas of focus are really determined and they're ready to hit that ground running. Because Tanya, really, I was thinking as you were sharing about your extra research you've done for Michigan, knowing that it's research, you can't speak probably too specifically to it, but when you say the importance of getting close, working in coaching cycles or deeper coaching over time with teachers to truly instantiate the practices that are the focus of their goals, looking at student data and seeing those shifts before moving on as a coach, that's informed by your firsthand knowledge of the research you're doing, right? And is it appropriate to ask you to talk a little bit more about that, even in generalities, about what you've been able to observe about coaching in Michigan?
Sure. So ending last spring, over 3 years, we collected a lot of data from coaches and teachers. I think somebody is not muted.
There we go. I muted one, but I'm trying to find the other. There we go. Thank you.
So we have had coaches who regularly each week logged what they were working on with teachers. And we had teachers share with us what they experienced as far as coaching, and teachers who didn't receive coaches share with us what they experienced as far as other professional learning. And when we look at all of that data, and this is initial, it's not published yet, what we do tend to see is a lot of bopping around, meaning, what we don't see is like working on the same thing where the teacher and the coach are saying, like, telling us that for 6 weeks, or a month or 3 weeks, even, they really worked intensively on that same thing. We are seeing that a little bit, a little bit of one essential, a little bit of another, a little bit of another. And so, that could be for a lot of reasons, right? Including that teachers are saying that's what they need help with, and we want to help teachers where they are. But it also, it doesn't align with the effective studies of coaching. And again, that's not any one coach, right? That's like across the board. There's sort of some patterns. And so it always reminds me to remind everybody how important these coaching cycles really are. Not just, sometimes coaching cycle is defined as like a time period. Like I work with that person for 6 weeks and then I go work with someone else. But I guess I am talking about what happens inside of that 6 weeks. And that 6 weeks is very dedicated and focused to moving a particular practice to look more like an instantiation of it that's sort of aligned to the research where that practice has been effective for kid learning.
Absolutely. And Tanya, one of the pieces of data from some of the meta-analyses we've looked at as a network guided by Dr. Lallier, bringing those to us, is the idea of, in looking across lots of models of professional learning where coaching has been an important strategy, in that across those, there's this range of at least 14 and up to 20 or so hours of professional learning around a specific practice for a teacher before we start to see that impact in student learning in that area. So when we think about the fact that we have 10 practices that kind of guide our work in classrooms, and often like goals are sometimes a combination of those, like Essential 9 to inform Essential 3 and things like that. But people have used that range, knowing it comes from research, of 14 to 20 hours. And sometimes they've put like these really tight boundaries around their coaching, like, well, it has to at least be that long, I can't stop until then. But actually that research shows that it's the combination of things like whole group professional learning. So this emphasizes the importance of a nested model or a built model where coaching is situated right inside the school's plans, their school improvement plans, their MyKIP goals, their learning goals around instruction in literacy. So when there is the opportunity for whole group, high quality professional learning, and perhaps even small group decisions around, so it's second grade, how are we going to take that and bring that into our work? And then also individual coaching, which looks like coaching cycles. Like sometimes it's the combination of all of that. And I'm not trying to minimize the importance of a coaching cycle and what happens there to help an individual teacher or a small group really instantiate a practice. That's important. But we also are kind of looking across all the work, and if it can all be intentional, if it can all be around research, if it can all be around zooming in on specifically what we notice that students need, that we can improve, then we know that according to research, that is going to make a difference for student learning. So I hope that didn't kind of like soften up the importance of what you were saying about deeper long-term time with teachers. It just meant I was meaning to confirm the importance of that work happening even in isolation with different teachers on different goals is going to have an impact, but it can have an even greater impact when all of that professional learning, all those structures are aligned to something that we're really building capacity around in a school community.
I totally agree. I think aligned systems of professional learning that are focused are the way. I mean, I think we just have evidence that that's the way to make change. That's not always the conditions you may enter. And that doesn't mean you can't make change, but that's the optimal, right? Is that there's just focus to the professional learning that's going on in any particular school community.
For more information on that, go to Coaching Essential 4. But really, like, Coaching Essential 4 is kind of what's the principal's role in establishing those conditions. And part of that is what the principal does, but also part of that is establishing a multi-year commitment to a professional learning focus. And so that also is one of the conditions that when that can be set for us as coaches, that can really usher in our ability to work over time on specific goals and have that impact quicker.
And I think that what we still see, Erin, in most schools and communities is this sort of like drop-in professional learning, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a workshop, a speaker, a little bit here, a little bit there. And what that, I mean, it's always interesting to know more stuff. But that makes the challenge with that is really in the implementation, right? So you can get really great information from a speaker or a workshop and think, I'm totally, as a teacher, right? I'm totally going to do that. I'm so inspired. You leave, and then Monday morning hits and you have all the requirements and commitments that, teachers do, right? That they always had before. And it's just hard to take that learning and implement it. And that's where coaches can be so powerful, right? So there's nothing wrong with having an amazing day or an amazing speaker, but then we've got to get the ideas from that to actually happen and make instructional change in the classroom. And that's a special place for coaches, right? To be able to say, like, how can we enact this in our instructional context? What is it going to take to get from where we are to what our goals are, or what we heard, or what we learned, or what we read about, and really move ourselves towards that, and in a way that's scaffolded for teachers and doesn't make them feel like they're kind of like going it alone and got some information and now they have to figure out, with all their busyness and real life of teaching, how to implement those new things in the classroom.
Absolutely. You said a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and that is going to stick with me because that's a great way to name the reality of many of the school systems that we might be in, especially if there've been, transient, changing leadership structures, which is so much the case. And so I quoted you there in the chat because I want to hold on to that question. How can we lead up? So we might not be decision makers as coaches, but how can we support and lead up when we're asked possibly to do something that feels like it's a little bit of this or a little bit of that? How can we capitalize on that moment and lead up for a deeper, more sustained professional learning focus? I just heard someone do that yesterday. They were asked to come and provide professional learning around opinion writing. And they took that opportunity to say, well, let's co-plan. And they co-planned with the school something that was much more sustained, much more connected to audience and purpose and pieces we know from Essential 6, and also connected to some of their work around social studies. So they were asked to do something like, oh, I think we need this thing. And they flipped that. They leveraged the opportunity to co-plan with the school. And that just inspires me because while they're not the people who say, no, I don't think you should, like, we might not be decision makers, but we can take those moments and remember that we can influence more sustained professional learning.
Erin, I think you asked me also, and we never got to, what I'm excited about the revised literacy essentials. And I guess I would say I'm most excited about the revised introduction. When I guess I would say, when we first wrote the literacy essentials, everyone who wrote them assumed that all of the ideas in the introduction were things people were thinking about outside of this document, right? And you know what they say about assuming. So we were excited, I think, to get to really state the commitments and the kind of
There's something really
ideals,
cool that I
right?
learned. I
For
figured out.
Here we go.
the commitments, the ideals, like the classroom spaces
Mhm.
that we envision the literacy essentials happening within. And just really getting to say that and write about it, and share those commitments in writing, I feel just happy and excited about. So if you're skipping the front matter when you're looking at those and jumping right to essential one, I would say please read the first few pages, because I think they're very important for sharing the broader values and commitments of the network, this coaching network, the organization, and are just so important. You know, it's great to do a wonderful read aloud, but if it's in a space where we are not, valuing children's voices and their contributions and what they bring from their home and family and community, and we don't give space to all of that, like, is it, are we really doing a great read aloud, right? So so much of what we're saying and doing really requires the enabling conditions that we discuss in that front part. So I'll be quiet, but I would just say, like, that's probably what I'm most excited about. That's where I feel like is the biggest movement in the document. And then the ways that those first couple of pages are reflected again and again and again in each essential, where we really have always talked about these things, but we really wrote it down, hopefully more clearly this time.
Mhm. Tanya, thank you. Thank you for being so close to the field. While you're at the university, you are so 1.5 feet still in the field, in the classrooms, in the schools, with some tiptoes at the university. That's how I perceive your work, because it's so relevant and it's so.
Don't tell my bosses.
Okay, well, I mean,
I only
maybe
have a toe in my university job.
No, I mean, not time analysis.
I'm making a joke.
Maybe not time analysis. I'm talking to your identity and how you really show up to us, so relevant, so knowledgeable about what's really happening. And then you use that, and your team use that to really listen to the field and say, what was assumed about the first version of the K-3 practices? What should have been articulated because we just had different thoughts about what our common ideas were in the field. And so thank you for leveraging what you know so clearly about our work and helping to create not just documents, but processes and conversations for us that help us be the best ambassadors of the best work for kids as possible. Thank you.
I don't know I don't know what our time is like, but there is a question in the chat.
I see the question in the chat. So I think what I'm going to do is email you, Julie. There's a lot to unpack there. Wow.
Okay, great.
I mean, the first resource for anyone who feels like perhaps they have some ability to lead up around how coaching is decided would be that administrator FAQ video, the 7 frequently asked questions by Michigan administrators, because it explicitly addresses how to set coaching up for success. And I read in that question a little bit of, I'm just curious about if you had influence in that, or even if your colleagues at Wayne Risa would be able to influence that. But at the same time, I mean, when I first started coaching, when it was brand new in my district in the mid 2000s, early 2000s, when I did, I mean, one thing that we decided to do, that the district decided to do, was have certain time with me so we could have some collaboration. And we went through the whole staff in that way, not like a you must, but just to experience a mini coaching cycle together so we could do some work together and I could learn. So there's ways where we can support everyone when coaching is new that doesn't feel prescribed, but man, it is hard when you're put into a position where you don't have relationship with the teachers, and then all of a sudden you get to work together. So I see a lot of things that could be talked about there, and I don't want to make any assumptions like we've already talked about this morning, Julie. So I do want to catch that comment and email you and just learn a little bit more too. And really, like all of us, that video for administrators that we could use to really have a third point to talk about those conditions that Tanya talked about today for the best start to our coaching work. Even though we've started, but like long-term start as we move into this year, that is a really great thing to have in your back pocket. It's linked in our kickoff resources. We referenced it, but if you need any help finding that, let me know. Tanya, thank you for this time. We are going to close this Zoom. We are going to head over to the main Zoom account. So go right back into that agenda, everyone. Click on that Zoom link. That's where we're at all morning, and we'll see you over there.